Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to do some cut testing on this Spyderco Ouroboros. This is a replica. I got it from 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗋𝗍. I even replaced the clip on it. This is a really cool knife. So this is one of those knives that you carry because your friends know you're always going to have a cool and unusual knife that you're pulling out of your pocket. I haven't yet found the ultimate use case for this. I'd love to hear what you guys think down in the comments, what this might be perfectly suited for. But we're going to take a quick look at the good, the bad, the ugly. I did do a full review on this. I'll put a link to it up there if you want to go back and see the full review. I'm trying to get through this pretty quick and just knock out this information fast so we can get on to the cutting and see how well it's going to hold an edge. So, Spyderco Ouroboros, which is basically that snake, circular snake thing that eats its own tail. That's basically the origin of the word Ouroboros. This knife was designed by an automotive engineer by the name of Paul Alexander. First came out for Spyderco back in 2016, but then by 2018 they were discontinued. It's kind of hard to find these out in the wild anymore. I did see one. Some guy was trying to charge $300, of course, for the real thing. I don't think I'd pay $300 for that. It's very cool and unique, but even the real version originally came in a VG10 steel. So you've got a G10 handled knife with nested steel liners in there with a VG10 blade, and they were charging about $180 to $190 for that. And I think that was part of the whole situation, was just that they couldn't sell enough of these at that price point by that point in time, even, 9, 10, 8 years ago, whatever that was. People were already looking for better steels, at least an S30V, S35, S45. All of those were now taking center stage, and VG10 just wasn't seen as a good enough super steel to warrant that $180 price tag like so many of the other knives that Spyderco was putting out. That being said, incredibly cool knife, really fun to fidget with. It's got a fantastic action. It sticks the landing every time. I enjoy this for a lot of reasons, but there's pros and cons, as there is with everything. Let's take a quick look at the specs for those of you who haven't seen it yet. We'll run down those real quick. This full open length is 6.8 inches. So it's, I'm going to say, small to medium size. I'm going to call this basically a medium-sized knife. The blade itself, this one comes in a little shorter than the real one. I'm not sure what the difference or how to explain that, but you get about 2.75 total. But of course, with this big finger choil, you've got about 2.5 inches of cutting length. In the closed position, it's just a hair over 4 inches, 4.16. Blade thickness on this is relatively thin and slicey, 110 thousandths. That's not too thin, not too thick. That's actually kind of a Goldilocks size in my opinion. Handle thickness is a little thicker than the original at 0.464. That's still under ½ an inch. You're not going to notice that in your hand. This is obviously a satin finished blade. Full flat grind, G10 scales of course, and says it's a VG10 steel. I doubt this is a VG10. Hard to know. I bought this for 25 bucks on OK Knives, so I'm not holding my breath that this is a real VG10. So hard to say what this is. Fairly light, 3.23 ounces. You can see that is a good bit heavier than the original and real version is. Does have the same compression lock. As I mentioned, the real one came in at about $188, and I got this for $25. I did measure behind the edge. However, I measured behind the edge after I reprofiled this edge. So I put this on the WorkSharp Pro and reprofiled it down to a relatively slicey, or really slicey, 18 degrees. Could have gone more on that, but I chose not to with this one. I gave it almost a mirror polish. I think I went up to 800 grit. Not, the best sharpening job in the world, but certainly I've seen a whole lot worse. It came out pretty good and even. It did feel a little bit on the soft side, so we're going to find out. That's why we do the cut test at all, so we can see how well that edge will hold up. That being said, 19 thousandths is what I measured. Now, the problem with that is because I sharpened it, I made the bevel taller. I pushed it farther up into the body of the blade. And the more you obviously push it up, which is where I measure it, I measure these when I do this. Oop, that's a little too much. Let's see if I can get this thing back down to a 2. I measure, where's my little pointer here? At the top of that grind, right here, up where it meets the unsharpened portion of the steel, not like just a fraction behind the edge. I measure, that's how I do it anyhow. at the point in which it meets the unfinished, unpolished edge there. And so 19 thousandths, because I sharpened it. Anytime you sharpen it and you make that bevel taller, you're going to lose a little bit on the BTE measurements, at least, again, the way I do it. All right, let's do some size comps. I forgot to do this last time. My apologies to the dollar bill guy. That one, I don't even remember your name. It's been so long. But he nicely suggested, hey, you should put them on a dollar bill. That helps the rest of us kind of know how that fits. You know, we all have a dollar. We can measure our own knives and decide, do I like that size? Is it big or not? You can see this is a fairly small knife. It's got that big rounded shape. Again, under 7 inches, 6.8 inches. So there you go with that. Let's do some other knives. I'll do really quickly here. We've got, of course, I always like to do the PM2 and the Para 3. This is obviously the OK version of that. And this Ouroboros, you can see, is even shorter than the PM2 or the PM3. Obviously shorter than PM2, Civivi Vision FG, and our favorite $10 D2 orange knife from Walmart and Ozark Trail. This, again, shorter than all of those knives there. And we'll do one more just because I feel like breaking out some knives and playing with them every once in a while. The old Vosteed Raccoon. That's an incredibly popular knife that I think just about everybody who collects knives probably has one of those. And some version of a Rosie. Again, shorter even than the Rosie, and less cutting edge as well. So, you know, you could technically categorize this as a small knife, 2.5 inch cutting edge. I guess we'll see what that means and how that plays out. A unique plunge grind. This was the other thing I wanted to point out. So this is an automotive engineer, so he probably understands structural integrity and weak points and strong points. And so if you can see, the plunge grind of this knife goes across. It starts up here and comes all the way across here, as opposed to straight up and down, which would have been at some of the thinner points of the knife and could have potentially left it a little thinner. The other thing he did was he left the blade thick almost all the way out till you get to that tip, and then it narrows down. So pretty structurally strong blade, even though it's 110 thousandths. The downside to this knife, the one thing that I have noticed, two things really, and they're both related to the same thing. Because this edge is sharpened, you obviously are meant to put this finger right up here. No problem once you get your finger into that slot. But if as you're bringing a finger down to get it into that slot, if you're not careful, the edge of that knife blade right there can nick you on the finger. The other thing is, I cannot do a left-handed drop. In most cases, you have to be real careful where that finger is. Like, I like a knife, even with a compression lock for a right hand, that I can drop. If I'm not careful, where I usually have my hand is right here, and that will bring that blade down on my fingertip and also can cut you. So it's not very friendly for right-handed people that are trying to manipulate it left hand. That being said, the action on this is great. The detent is great. It's pretty well even centered in there. I have taken it apart multiple times. I have treated, you've got a fixed point on this side. I've taken it apart. I've put the, I'm losing my words, Loctited it so it's nice and firm and fixed in there. It's a fun little knife, especially with this clip. So these came with the old spoon clips that you typically get from all the Spydercos. You can see I do not like these. I have replaced these on all my knives when I can with this Lynch style, more of a deep carry clip. It just disappears in the knife, and that clip makes a world of difference in the comfort of using this knife. So this is a great, fun little knife. I did sharpen it, as I mentioned, down to 18 degrees. This is what I'm going to call a 10. So you get spoiled at some point. When you can push a knife straight across without having to slice it, I can just literally push it through the paper without having to slice through the paper. Hopefully that makes sense. Most sharp knives, you can slice through paper. But a really sharp knife, you can just hold in the same spot and push it all the way through. That's what this is. That's a 10 out of 10 in my book. So that's where we're starting with the cutting test today. Let's go get started. And as always, we are going to start with the cardboard cutting test. I've got 399 square inches. I'm going to use that forward choked up with my finger in that big choil, which is how this knife is designed to be used. Pretty thin, slicey knife here. The challenge with this knife, it cuts through cardboard like nothing. The blade is great. It's definitely very sharp. But it's just a 2.5 inch blade with a big belly, so it's almost a little more challenging to keep it in the cut. One of the things I experience with this is that it's somewhat easy to overcut and push your hand too far into it so the cardboard slips into that big finger choil where your finger is. And I ran into that a few times. Not a big deal. Certainly very easy to cut cardboard with this thing, especially if you're going slow and paying attention. But I thought that was worth mentioning at least. You know, big belly has its pros and cons. We're going to see all the pros here in a lot of these cut tests. But as far as cardboard goes, especially having just sharpened this knife, it handled that no problem. So let's see if we did any damage here. First cut, pretty good. Second cut, still pretty good. Third cut, I'm seeing just maybe a minor snag. I'm trying to go very slow in here. I'm actually going to speed this up a little bit. But now I'm trying to find out, okay, is this serious? Can I cut right past it? And you can see all these other cuts from that point forward. I can easily cut right past it. So I'm going to start this out. I'm going to say, let's give it a 9. We'll see. All right, this is not really a graded test. This is just to show you how easy it is to do draw cuts. That certain curve down at that belly makes it very easy to get this thing down on the table. It's almost like a sheep's foot blade in that regard because of the arc of that blade coming down. So very good on that. Let's move on to the hose here. For the hose, I'm also, again, looking at, this is where that big belly is going to come in really good. I want to pop just through that. This is like a reinforced PVC flex hose, and I just want this knife to be able to pop right through it. And as you can see, those pieces are just popping off the edge of the knife. And now, again, where this big belly comes in, you can just rock that blade right through all of these cuts and handles the hose no problem at all. Now, the big question is, will that have done any additional damage to this sharpened blade? Let's take a look and see here. Not feeling anything, so there's a good pass right there. Let's go again. Yeah, you can see you can cut fast right through. When I go slow, that little tiny nick right there, I'm trying to feel that out. How severe is it? And you can see, even when I slow down, you can definitely cut right past it. So we're still cutting paper pretty easily. This is still a very sharp knife. I'm going to knock it down to an 8.5 and we'll keep on going. All right, with the hose, again, this is where this belly is going to come in really good. You can just rock that blade right through, and I'm looking for this pop. You can see how, obviously not in that cut, but in the rest of the cuts, once I get my hand held right, you can see this knife just pops right through that rope. Nice, clean cut, very little fraying of the rope, and that's what I'm looking for. So this is one of the better knives for sure in this rope test. That's a 2 thumbs up, easy. Let's see though, the sisal rope tends to do a lot of damage. I've got some gunk on the blade that was left over from the cardboard, probably some tape. That can cause it to hang up in the paper too. Just the paper doesn't want to slide across that gunk area. But you can see no significant damage. There's that one little nick in the belly that we've had since the cardboard, but I can easily cut right past it. There's no additional damage from the rope. It's still exactly the way it was before, so I'm going to stay with an 8.5, and we'll keep on going through here. Wood test is more about ergonomics than anything. I'm going to start off choked up on the knife. And one of the things I don't point out probably enough in these videos, this stick is really hard wood. It's just pine, but this is just a really hard piece of pine, one of the hardest I've run across. So that's why it doesn't quite dig in as much. Although I'll tell you, that being said, it is having good bite into the wood. So ergonomics pretty good so far. I like that big bulb handle. The clip is definitely a big deal. Now I'm going to choke back on the knife to see how it feels. You know, if you want to choke back a little bit on it and really grab around the bulb of that handle, you can see great bite into the wood. And the ergonomics on this thing are great. But again, it's because I replaced the clip. I don't think the stock clip would have been nearly as good. All right, let's see. You know, one of the things I see a lot, you guys have probably seen this if you watch these videos, after I cut wood, these blades tend to perform better. That's that one snag in the belly that we've had since the beginning at the cardboard, but you can obviously cut right past it pretty quickly. That was all sped up there. So I'm going to say we haven't done any additional damage. Let's move on to the strop and see if we can strop this thing back. And this strop is 16 micron on the brown side. I'll speed this up so we get through here pretty quick. I do basically 10 passes on the 16 micron and then flip it over to the 6 micron green side. and I'll do another 10 passes. This shouldn't be too tough. We don't really know what steel it is. Maybe it's a VG10, but I doubt it at $25. At any rate, because we hadn't really done any significant damage, this thing hot knife through butter. So we are easily back to a 10 out of 10. So very easy to strop back, which makes this knife even more desirable, in my opinion, for an EDC knife. Really easy to sharpen back. So let's take a look at the test results. Down the far right-hand side in the blue column is today's knife, along with the last 11 tests that we've done. This is the Spyderco Ouroboros Replica. This is got it from OK Knives for $25. The real one comes in VG10. I doubt that's what this is, but we don't know what it is. Oftentimes, it'll be a 9CR18 usually from OK Knives. That tends to be what they use when they don't tell you what they're using. If this was a real VG10, it would be a 4.5 on the Knife Steel Nerds edge retention score. I did resharpen this to an 18 degree before the test. That always makes the test come out better. So we were 10 out of 10 at the beginning on sharpness scale. 399 square inches. I dropped it to, I actually downgraded it again to an 8.5. I don't think it was fair to give it a 9. There was that one minor snag you could easily cut past. So yeah, I knocked it a half a point off. Did our 5 reinforced kind of flex PVC cuts. Still 8.5 out of 10 on the edge retention. No real damage additional done there. I did 11 rope cuts just because this thing was cutting so good. Some of the best rope cutting out of any knives that I've ever tested. That big belly, that's really the strength of this knife. Still 8.5 after the rope test. And then we did our wood cutting, still an 8.5 after that as well. Stropped it back, 20 strokes per side, back to a 10 out of 10. This is a really great $25 knife for a lot of reasons. That's really good edge retention out of an unknown steel, and even if it's a 9CR18, still a very good edge retention. Again, I sharpened it beforehand, and that always makes a difference. The only real issue on the cardboard, as I mentioned back when we were cutting cardboard, is that it's a relatively small 2.5-inch blade. It's got a big belly on it. That means it's easy to slide out of cuts or to slide into cuts. And what happened a lot with me, a few times, was that as I was cutting, it would slide into the cut, and then the cardboard would end up in that finger choil next to my finger. So you just have to, be aware of the size of the blade in the belly in order to try to keep it in the cardboard cut. Not a big issue at all. I'm just pointing out whatever negatives I can possibly find here. Tore through the cardboard like nobody's business. Excellent rope cut. Like I said, some of the best rope cutting out of any knife I've tested. Almost the same thing really with the hose, and that's because that big belly. So this is where that big belly really shines, is that you can easily get good downward force. You can rock that belly through cuts like hose and rope, and it just pops right through those things really well. So that's part of its real strength. Good bite into the wood. Great ergonomics. Again, with that replacement pocket clip, you just have to do those, man. If you get one of these knives, I'm telling you, it changes the whole performance and just handling and how comfortable this knife is to use to have one of those. It's like $4 or $5 on AliExpress. Otherwise, excellent ergonomics throughout. There was no hot spots anywhere. Again, the pocket clip made the big difference on that. Better performance than expected all the way around out of this knife. This is one of those strange knives where I've been trying to really figure out where does this knife fit in terms of like my EDC carry, and I think that's just basically what it is. It's a great smallish knife to put in your pocket. It's going to easily cut anything you've got from cardboard to rope to hoses to packages. It's easy to get that tip down onto the table. Like with draw cuts, as we saw there. So in terms of edge retention, I'm going to give it an 8, and in EDC, it's got to be a 9. Good action on this. I like the G10 scales. They're plenty grippy enough. It's small. It's got a cool, unique shape. Certainly, it's pretty fidgety because the action was so good. It sticks the landing. It doesn't bounce out. It's not frustrating in that regard. Got the compression lock, which is an incredibly strong lock to have. So all the way around, a pretty cool knife. I'm glad I did this test. This actually has made this knife a little bit more desirable for me to carry. So fun knife, Cool to have, definitely worth the 25 bucks. But I can see I might not want to pay 180 bucks for the real one on this thing. You can't get them anymore anyhow. They're not on the market anymore. But if you want to try this one out, I think you'll be pretty pleased with it. You may want to resharpen it, put your own fresh edge on it. I think that certainly helps always in the edge retention scores. I reprofiled it to an 18 degrees. I'd love to know, do any of y'all have this knife? Has anyone picked up this knife, and what's y'all's experience with it? Is it more or less the same? Have you found any really cool uses or any good shortcomings? Let me know down in the comments. As always, if you're not already subscribed, we'd love to have you join our little band of renegades here in the dark corners of the interwebs. You can hit that subscribe button below. If you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up button on your way out. That really helps little channels like ours get found on the YouTubes. Otherwise, I look forward to chatting with you guys in the comments. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.